Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
It's by thy grace. It's by thy grace that I feel your holy name. How often do we want to think our way to God? Just try to figure it out with our minds, learn a lot of metaphysics, read a lot of books, try to figure it all out. And the heart of this song tells us to feel the holiness, feel your way to God. Charles Fillmore, a Unity co-founder, advised us to feel after God. Not try to think your way to God, but feel that. Do you find that you want to put God in a box somehow with your mind, get it all figured out, get that definition? And that's that. Well, once I figure out all that God is, then I'll know. And how can God be defined? Really? We know that the limitation of human language, once we put something into a word, it becomes limited in its form. And to talk about something that's unlimited, even beyond the scope of our human comprehension. Now, what if God was the whole experience of life happening, and we're a part of it? The whole experience, all of it, not just when we show up in a service or listen to some sacred music or what have you, or have an experience, but the whole thing, the whole experience of life. What would it be like to live as if everything was an experience of God, as if everything was here to support you, to teach you, and nothing was against you. Nothing could possibly be against you, because we recognize divine intelligence in and through every molecule of everything. There's that wonderful phrase, there's no spot where God is not. I love that. God everywhere, present. And so we move into the sixth practice of living originally. We've done the 5 core practices over the past 5 teachings of this series. Now we're into the 6th. So the first 5 are intended to be continued throughout your practice. And now we're moving into these next 5 practices. These are 10 practices for transforming your life to living originally, to be, I have the book here. I love this cover by Robert Brummett. And the meditation is the practice, the very practice for this lesson today, of actually putting the teachings into the visualization into your body and opening up to that image, all part of this, transforming your life through the practice. So this particular practice, Robert Brummett encourages us to do it for 30 days at least, to live into it. It's not meant to be a practice that you do all the time, but you could. Mainly the core practices are what you want to continue, and you can take this one on for 30 days, and then the next subsequent ones that we'll have in this series. So consider if every person, every place, every event is a potential teacher. Could be a teacher. You might be saying, I don't want that kind of teacher. So recognizing there's goodness there. There's always something good. My work is to learn from it. That's our work, to learn from it, whatever it is, however it shows up. Robert Brummett said, to learn is to gain the ability to express myself in ways not possible before the learning occurred. So we're engaging in this opportunity to learn, right? To expand ourselves in ways that we never before thought of. It provides a greater freedom of expression when we learn, when we're open to learning, when we are not continually living from what we think we know, right? We're open to something new. One new thing that many of us learned, perhaps some of us have been doing it, but many of us learned in the pandemic, is Zoom. We had to learn how to use Zoom. We may have some people who are still learning Zoom or haven't tried it yet, but for many of us it was Zoom. It was a new skill to transfer what we've been doing in person and classes here at the church. I had to learn how to transfer those skills into Zoom. So there were breakout rooms, there was a chat, there are all those things that are involved, and noticing my own resistance, like, oh, well, I was doing it this other way, and I've got to adapt, and working through that. That's the practice called discipline. When there's something for us to learn, and we move through that resistance that shows up that says, oh, this is going to take extra effort and time, I'm going to have to focus on this, I'm really going to have to learn it, and to override that resistance and adapt to the change in exchange for the greater freedom. So once I learned how to be more comfortable teaching on Zoom, and then I had some greater freedom to teach in that way, and it opened up the ministry to have classes to people all over the world who could connect with us. So there was a greater sense of freedom that came once I and all the rest of us on the staff adapted and adjusted to this new tool, to use this new medium. And so that's that discipline that we bring to learning, of keeping with it even when we move through the tough part of adjusting and being awkward, perhaps, in the beginning particularly. So in this chapter, Robert shares that there are two types of learning. There's the one that we're most familiar with, which is conventional learning, where we recognize there's something we don't know, we go learn it. Like, I don't know how to play piano, I go learn piano. I don't know how to speak French, I go take some French classes to learn how to speak French. So it's extending my knowledge, extending your knowledge and skills in a way that is horizontal. So you're broadening yourself, but not necessarily deepening yourself. Broadening your knowledge to have some more freedom. So I know if I don't have much freedom to play piano now, because I'm certainly not as skilled as David. David has a lot more freedom there, and if I took more lessons, I could have some more freedom to play some different types of pieces on the piano. Same would be true of a language, where you could communicate with people in different countries, different people. Maybe in this city has so many different languages spoken that you could get to know more people, maybe grow your circle of friends and that kind of thing, read different books in the language. So we recognize that learning something in the conventional learning leads us to some more freedom, and it's this horizontal type of a growth. So the other type of learning, which is the learning that we're talking about in this practice of everything is your teacher, is deep learning. So this is the vertical learning. So you can even kind of feel this learning new skill or some more knowledge, broadening. You almost feel it as a horizontal kind of learning of growth. And then there's this deepening vertical learning that we're talking about spiritually. That's when you learn something that you didn't know you didn't know. Something that is transformative, evolutionary even. It's a whole new level of being. And it can take you to a place that you've never conceived of before. Certainly in my experience of when I came to Unity and where I am now, I never could have conceived that I would be here tonight and speaking in the pyramid and sharing this lesson with you, from having first walked in the door of my first Unity church that I went to. So this is where it's taking you somewhere transforming, not just physical places, really not about that. It's about your inner transformation. And typically we don't recognize the shift and the growth until afterwards and backward reflection upon it. Oh, I see how far I've come since then, and might not notice it in the day-to-day. But as you reflect, you recognize that when you allow yourself to be open to transformation, to new learning, that it can transform your whole life. And there's deep learning available in every moment of life. There is no lack of an opportunity to learn. That's how the universe is structured for us as a benefit to us and our time here on this planet. When I used to go to Unity Village for classes, when I was first learning on my path towards becoming a licensed Unity teacher first, before I became a minister, I was taking spiritual education enrichment classes, and they would have an orientation in the Fillmore Chapel, and the minister who usually did the orientation, Reverend Tom Thorpe, he would speak to us, and I remember him saying, the reason why you came may not be the reason why you're here. The reason why I came may not be the reason why I'm here. I remember the first time I heard that, it's like, curious, wondering, really open. There's kind of something mysterious about that. I want to find out what that's about. The reason why you came may not be the reason why you're here. Robert Brummett tells us this story in the chapter about Christopher Columbus. The reason why he came to the New World was not the reason that we discovered. He was out, did you know he was looking for India? So he was traveling eastward to look for India, which is why when he came to this country, or wasn't a country then, that when he met the natives, he was calling them Indians because he thought he was in India. There was no way for him to fully understand what arriving in this new world had implications of, from his discovery to the whole planet and Western civilization as we know it now. His landing in the New World was way beyond his comprehension. The consequences of this discovery were beyond the understanding of anyone at his time. And now we look back at it and go, wow, how monumental, and what a shift it created for the evolution of civilization as we know it. And so the deep learning that occurs in us, it happens like this. It takes us places that we never even knew existed. Like, as the example, Christopher Columbus, we're talking about spiritual places that we never knew existed in consciousness, in our inner experience, and which can take us to some different places in our lives too. And it opens up worlds that were perhaps inconceivable to us previously. We really don't need to create any kind of spiritual curriculum for ourselves. We may think, I really need to find the teacher or the guru or the book or whatever it is to follow a program to figure this all out. So we can complicate our spiritual lives this way, and we can uncomplicate them by opening to what is and being willing to learn from what is present right here and now. Life gives us this, I think now that it's Thanksgiving season, we're coming to Thanksgiving next week, this cornucopia of opportunities, just an abundance, a harvest, if you will, to learn, experiences to learn, where we have the opportunity to meet every experience with an open mind, an open heart, and a willingness to learn. Discipline plays a role in this deep learning. So we talked about the discipline of playing piano or learning a language. There's a discipline in our spiritual practice as well. We may not know the fruits of when we sit and take time in meditation, watching the breath, noticing our thoughts, noticing sensations in the body, of where that may reveal a deep learning in our lives day to day. And we recognize over time as we look back the essential shifts that happen and learn to become a disciple of our own essential nature. So Robert Brumman tells us that the words discipline and disciple have the same origin. So we can recognize that we can become a disciple of the spiritual teacher within, you could say, or the spiritual teacher of life, and learning that to continue to unfold our essential nature. Anyone remember the movie from the 80s, The Karate Kid? You see The Karate Kid? Nobody? Oh, a few claiming, yes, we've seen The Karate Kid. So tell you a bit about that story, the story of Daniel, who is Ralph Macchio. Just wonderful remembering seeing this when I was little. He was the new kid in school, and there were these boy thugs who would come and beat him up because they just wanted to, and they were these karate expert kids. They'd been trained in karate, and one night he was getting beat up again by these kids, and this old man, this old Japanese man, comes forward. He looks very fragile and frail, and who would think he could really do anything? And that was Mr. Miyagi, and he comes up to the kids. He beats up these thugs for Daniel, and he does it without even breaking a sweat. He saves Daniel, and so Daniel is just in awe of him, and he says, "Will you be my teacher? I want to learn from you." And so Mr. Miyagi accepts him as his student, and he invites him to his home. And so to begin to teach him karate, he asks him to wax his collection of antique cars. And he says there's just this very specific process that it's strict and it's a circular motion: wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. And you can imagine Daniel doing this for hours and hours and hours, waxing Mr. Miyagi's cars. And after all this time doing this, he thinks he's there to learn karate, right? He's waxing his cars for him. And then he's ready. He thinks, okay, now I'll get to learn karate. And he said, okay, the next thing you're going to do is sand the floor. Sand the floor side to side in certain motion. And then after sanding the floor for hours and hours, he has him paint the fence up and down, over and over, and paint the whole fence. And by the time he's done with this third project, he is utterly furious with Mr. Miyagi. He's frustrated, he's done with it, and he goes to him and he says, I came here to learn karate, not to wax cars, not to paint fences. Mr. Miyagi ignores his protest, and he instructs him, wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off. And he must go back to do this. And eventually Daniel sees that these three practices that he was given were efforts to prepare him for karate moves. And so when Mr. Miyagi came to him, he was able to stop his arm or his leg, and his body had it in his muscle memory to know what to do, these karate moves, and it was pretty amazing. It was such a wonderful part of the film. And under his teaching, Daniel then became very adept at karate, and he went to this big championship competition, and he won it against all these guys who'd been doing karate for many, many years, because of his discipline to his practice had prepared him day after day after day of doing the practice as he had learned, had paid off, and he became a master amongst these karate students, one of the leading students. Don't think he was a master in karate, but amongst these students. So this story gives us an illustration of what it is to be disciplined in our spiritual practice. We might not see the relationship of our daily practice to what our mind might desire as an outcome of why we sit, why we pray, or why we do certain things. And we might protest that, it feels like wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. I'm watching my breath, sitting with the body, I'm focusing on an affirmation or whatever your spiritual practice is. We do the practice unusually in conventional learning ways, but typically in spiritual learning or deep learning, that we're not looking for a specific outcome. So it's letting go of that desire for a specific outcome, or noticing it, but recognizing that we want to be open to no specific outcome. And that requires patience and trust. Patience and trust over and over again throughout the practice. One of my favorite stories that Robert happens to share in this chapter is a story of a young man who goes to a Zen master, and he says to the Zen master, I am devoted to Zen. I want to study Zen. I want to really commit. If I meditate every day, how long will it take me to become enlightened? And the teacher quickly replied, 10 years. 10 years. And the student was really impatient, and he answered, but I want to attain it faster than that. I will meditate 12 hours a day, every day. How long will it take then? And the Zen master thought about it, and he said, 20 years. 20 years. So why he was so focused on an outcome, right? Saying we can let go of those outcomes. So why is this practice of everything is our teacher transformative? It's transformative because it recognizes that we are learning to live from our essential nature, and then our essential nature is infinitely more than our ego, our limited ego. When we want to have a healthy ego, a healthy body, it's important to allow for us to have a spiritual practice. We need both in order to live life on this planet. But it's not enough to have a healthy ego and a healthy body. That's not enough, because it's not all that we are. It's partial. It's partial, not all that we are. So the practice is not to destroy or eliminate the ego, not at all, but to transcend and include the ego. To transcend and include the ego. So as you learn to expand beyond the ego, you learn to become more transparent, more open, and the ego serves as a vehicle for your essential nature rather than an obstacle, rather than a kind of structure, an armor that keeps you from fully expressing all that you are. So we're opening up to more than we think we are. So that takes trust, that takes patience. Recognizing the ego is not open to truth. The ego usually wants to take a position, wants to fight for its belief systems, protect its belief systems, promote its beliefs. And when we're identified with the ego, we're not open to learning. We're allowing our scope to become a lot smaller and limited. And one more story for you from the text, another wonderful Zen story of a university professor who went to see a Zen master to learn more about Zen. And the professor wanted to impress the Zen master, so he introduced himself and he let him know how much he knew about Asian religion and Asian culture and Asian history, but that he knew little about Zen, so he wanted to add that to his cachet of knowledge, and so he was there to learn. And the Zen master then served the professor some tea, and he started filling his cup, and he kept filling it and filling it and filling it until it was overflowing and then flowing all over the floor. And the professor said, "Stop, you're filling it too much. The cup is already so full." And the Zen master responded like this: "Like this cup, you too are full of your presumed knowledge. I cannot show you Zen unless first you empty your cup." What does that mean? Empty your cup of all you think you know, because that which you seek is beyond that. It's beyond that, right? Wisdom teachings of so many traditions that we know tell us that openness and teachability and being humble are key factors in transformation. So here are a few. From Greece, Socrates, ancient Greece, Socrates said, "As for me, all I know is that I know nothing." From the great philosopher Socrates, I know nothing. In China, the Tao Te Ching says, "Yield and overcome, bend and be straight, empty and be full." And from the Gospels, Jesus shared this, "Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." So the practice for this week for us is to meet every experience that shows up in our lives with an open mind and open heart, and with the intention of learning something about yourself, being open to what that is. And one way that you can begin to approach the practice is very simple. Just repeat, "Everything is my teacher." Let's say that together. Everything is my teacher. Again, everything is my teacher. Yes, everything is my teacher. Living in that way. And if you encounter something that brings you fear, or you find yourself in judgment or an attachment to an outcome, that's the best time to practice, according to Robert Brummett. He says the bigger the attachment, the bigger the learning opportunity. So right there where there's that edge and that discomfort, that's the best teacher. And so we can give a namaste to that experience and be open and just be gentle with ourselves with this process, and perhaps not take on every single thing as our teacher, but just be open to what really is present for us to learn from moment to moment, not trying to force anything to happen, and just knowing that being open is the key. This too is my teacher, and so it is.
Thank you, Reverend Jeanmarie. That was wonderful teaching, and a wonderful, kind of array of wisdom, that you gave us to this evening. I particularly liked the idea of some learning is horizontal, that expands us and gives us more freedom. And I was trying on some of those things and thinking, yeah, it does. It gives you more elbow room. It gives you more space, more ways of expressing. But does it really deepen? Does it really transform? Because I know that's the purpose of this teaching the book, is that you want to, like you said, become something you didn't know, to even be trying to. You don't know what you don't know. And when you do think you know it, you've already contained it. You're already the full cup, right? Even if I want to get better at that, still I'm expanding horizontally. I'm still not going deeper, because the surprise factor is really the thing that takes us deeper. And I was just really fascinated by that. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, I needed the whole presentation to come into a space of questioning, or of opening, to live into the question of, well, what is there to learn? Because early on, as you were sharing about it, I stumbled onto a very familiar friend in my own thinking of, I might even be aware that I'm closed off, that my cup is full. And it's not that I'm committed to staying that way, but I kind of fall into a pattern of, well, but how do I change it? Being aware of it just seems so insufficient. I'm wanting to be open, like now. And how do I do that? And what I came to appreciate through hearing you share the stories and sort of living into the question over a period of minutes is that, well, engaging, just staying curious and being gentle with myself, and allow the experience itself to inform, well, I will learn what I need to learn just through staying open to the question. Mary used to say, are you willing? If you're not willing, well, are you willing to become? Just sort of just take another step back. So I can see how this would be beneficial in a period of learning. Because there's knowledge-based learning, like, hey, how do you make purple? Well, you mix red and blue. Okay, well, once you've learned that, now you know it, right? But most of the things that really have meaning in our lives are more like the performing arts, in that it's not just learning a thing, algebraic phrase, or to do something. It is weaving it into your body. It's weaving it into your consciousness and practicing it, just like our spiritual discipline. That takes repetition, discipline. I would also say just asking the question, take the lid off. Where am I? Where do I need to open?
Yes. So where do I need to open more? Sometimes we get wake-up calls too, right? With things that happen in our lives, and recognize that. I just keep thinking about this experience that I had this weekend, and my daughter was fussing with her iPad, and she was taking videos and things in the car. It was very distracting, and I went to grab it, and the car slowed down, and behind me there was a bus. Like, I slowed down because I went to grab her iPad. It was a bus, and the bus started honking. I was like, oh my goodness. And so I paid attention to driving, and I started driving the same rate I was, so I didn't get rear-ended by a bus. And I was like, oh my goodness, we could have gotten hit by a bus. So it was just one of those wake-up call things. What was there for me to learn? Well, one is having priorities while I'm driving, right? It's so easy to kind of get caught up in the moment with especially with a child, and wanting to create safety in the car and out of the car. So it woke me up to my reactions and responsibilities, certainly, in that experience.
I really liked the meditation too, really exploring a situation, or the feeling, the direction for the feeling, and then the direction to kind of concretize that image and see what it becomes. And I've used that kind of visualization before really productively, and tonight was also helpful in getting sort of an image of a mythical person to embody this experience. And I'll play with that some more, and kind of like ask more questions of it, and so that I can understand it better. And it occurred to me that I could, I know what it is, that I have already spent on this particular issue a lot of delving inward and on past experience and emotions and feelings, and I've spent a lot of time knowing what that is and what it feels like. And that now I think what I can do is I can lift out and see it from like the view of spirit. Like for me, looking at some of the things that are going on in my life from a, I don't know, how can I say this? From like a heavenly view, like a spiritual view, like a soul's view, like the long haul view, like 10,000 years from now, because my soul will still exist, I believe, what will this have meant? So if I can get further out of it, where I can look at it, I get much more awareness of the context of what is really important. What's the takeaway? It isn't trying to figure out the ins and outs and the ups and downs, but rather get really high-minded, and then from there I can see, that's what it's for, or that's what I need, or that's where I want to be, or and I can go there now. Sometimes I can just go there now. I don't know if I'm actually healed, but it's progress still, because I've done I've done the dredging, I've done the, the scraping and the raking through and all of that. But maybe just from a higher view, I can now see what is my essence, that I'm really lovable right here, right now. I don't have to get finished with this necessarily. And that it will unfold, and that it will show me the way, and that just shine some love on that and myself, and maybe that's the healing for the moment. It's always, but like you said earlier, when you were describing something, Robert said, it's really what you didn't already know. Somehow you're going to discover something you didn't already know, or put it together in a different way than you knew to put it together before. It's always the surprise, yes. And you couldn't have guessed it, which is what I love about it. That's what I love.
Slides the back door.
He gives a great practice in the chapter of journaling with the situation and dialoguing with it. You could dialogue as yourself and the person in the situation, or you could dialogue with the energy of the event itself, that it has its own kind of life and energy that can be dialogued with. And I practice with that some. And it's very interesting, because if we live recognizing that whoever we're seeing is kind of a mirror, an aspect of ourself, that kind of thing, we're all one, that also is in us. And so there's some way to communicate with it within our own psyche, our own conversation with spirit.
I like that. That might speak to this question I'm going to put forth actually to both of you. It was inspired in part by what you said earlier, but then also you reminded me of it whenever you said sometimes we get wake-up calls. So when we are confronted by anything, we're disciplined. It can be by a child, it can be by a colleague, by a family member. But something's brought to our attention that they believe is important, that to me, that, okay, you need to change in this way. So what I'm curious about is on the situations when it's very clear that, okay, this is mine to do, I need to grow in this way. Great, no problem. I take it on, I embody it, I'll move through it just great. But if there is an occasion when, wait a minute, this isn't about me, this is about this other person, and there's something about boundaries having to come into the mix, and actually I'm kind of rejecting this accusation. I'm not buying it. What resources what skills would you tap into? What ideas do you have about how to still learn from everything that's being presented when I know in my heart of hearts that only a sliver of what is coming my way is actually mine. Most of this needs to stay over there. And yet I don't want to miss the lesson either. I mean, is it as simple as just living into the question about, well, what if this is mine, or what, everything? What was the mantra we repeated?
Everything is my teacher.
Everything is my teacher. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that necessarily. I guess what I'm hearing is that the person who is confronting you or addressing you, that what they're saying to you, you don't have to accept it as a truth.
Yes.
So is that what the question was about?
Yeah.
Well, what is it? It could be teaching you. I don't know, boundaries, something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would offer that's entirely possible, that it's, especially since you're not feeling like, yes, that's something I need to uncover, or that's something I've been focused on, and now this person's, brought it to my attention, so I'm going to run off and do it. But now when you realize, wait up, it's like, the thing that you could do with that person is to inquire more deeply into. So if I behaved the way, or I stopped doing, or I said it that way, or what do you imagine would happen? Oh, wow. Just so I can get, there's no animosity, there's no manipulation, there's nothing. It's really curiosity, you know. I know that's one of your favorite things is curiosity. So if you remember to be curious, asking more deeply what they see would happen. How would this relieve them or whatever? And begin to see, is it only you or is it everywhere they go? Or, you know, you'll begin to see something that you may be able to support them in from an open-hearted place, not, you know, to one-up them or to flip the tables on them and now find their thing they have to fix, you know. It really is an exploration together, you know, and something that you will learn too, and also feel what it feels like to know that your wisdom is enough for the situation, that there really isn't anything else that you have to fix or change to be okay, or to be in relationship, or to be useful in this relationship, you know? So I think always, just like we were saying, it's always a surprise, you know, that the best news is it's a surprise, you know? Who'd have thought, you know, that would come out of that, you know?
Yes, thank you, Karen.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.